US President Donald Trump issuing an ultimatum to Hamas, warning that Gaza will suffer if all remaining captives are not released. It comes as after his administration confirmed that it held direct talks with the militant group in Doha. Discussions between the two sides, along with mediators from Egypt and Qatar, reportedly took place last night. And Mr. Trump earlier urged Hamas to leave the enclave while they still have a chance, adding there will be, quote, hell to pay if demands are not met. Now, the US president also suggesting that he was sending Israel weapons to finish the job. Hamas says Mr. Trump's threats are complicating efforts and that it would encourage Israel to back out of the ceasefire deal. Now, let's get more. We have Nick Harper live from Washington, D.C., as well as Giles Gibson, who is live from Tel Aviv. And Nick, first to you. It is unprecedented for the U.S. to negotiate directly with groups like Hamas. So what's come out of the talks in Doha?
That's right, Jill. It's a long-standing policy of the United States not to directly engage with any groups that are designated as a terrorist organisation, such as Hamas. Normally, they would use intermediaries like Qatar and Egypt, but here we're seeing something very different, and the Trump administration would say this is all part of Donald Trump's out-of-the-box thinking to try and solve global problems, global conflicts, global crises. We know that the US hostage affairs envoy Adam Boehler was in Doha. He was taking part in those direct talks with Hamas, all aimed at trying to release the remaining American Israelis being held by the terrorist organization. There are 5 in total. Only one of them, though, is thought to be alive. That is Eden Alexander. The other 4 American Israelis are all thought to be dead. The US is trying to get their bodies returned. We're also hearing news as well that the US spoke to Hamas about the second phase of this ceasefire plan. Egyptian sources saying that those talks ended positively. But on top of all of this, we're seeing Donald Trump on social media with a very fiery ultimatum for Hamas. He told them to release all the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it is over for you. He also called the group sick and twisted and went on to say, this is your last warning. If the hostages are not freed, you are dead. That last word in capital letters. It's not clear what action the United States would take, but it certainly echoes that language that he put on social media just ahead of his inauguration on January the 20th, where he said there would be hell to pay for Hamas if it didn't start to move in the right direction. And of course, after that, we saw it leading to the first phase of the ceasefire deal with those hostages being released. So we're still waiting to see whether this latest threat from the US president will help to push things in the right direction and get those hostages released.
Yeah, and Giles, you're in Tel Aviv. What's been the progress on moving on to the second phase of the ceasefire in Gaza?
Well, we're roughly 5 days since the expiry of phase 1, and we are still very much trapped in this kind of limbo situation with both sides really digging into their respective positions. You have Israel saying that they want to extend phase 1 for about 6 weeks in total, saying they want Hamas to release more hostages, and to do so, to try and put pressure on Hamas to do so, they've introduced that blockade of humanitarian aid coming into Gaza. Hamas are saying for their part that they want to stick to the original plan, moving on to what's known as phase 2, which of course includes the complete withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. We have had in recent days a pretty significant development in terms of that plan that's been put forward by the Arab League. It's round about 100 pages setting out how Gaza could be reconstructed at a cost of more than $50 billion. But really at this stage, it's just so hard to see how we get from this moment to even the start of that process. We saw Nick talking there about how the Trump administration, even before it got into office, managed to get this first sort of deal across the line. I think what we should be watching for very carefully in the coming days is when the US Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, actually travels to the region. We keep hearing reports that he's about to land in the region for talks. Then we keep hearing reports that it's been pushed back. I think when he does actually come to the region, that is going to be a pretty credible sign that there could be some sort of movement, potentially Hamas caving and signing up to an extension to phase one.
Yeah, we will certainly watch for that development. Thank you both so much for those reports. Nick Harper is in Washington, D.C., Giles Gibson in Tel Aviv.